Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kevin Zimmerman of Unlocking Black History on YouTube. In today's session, we're going to discuss the 5 key takeaways from last Sunday's video regarding Brown versus the Board of Education. The title of the video, of course, was "They Said Separate but Equal." But before we dive in, I want to cover something that happened that I feel is very significant. I know that we all don't share the same opinion, but I think it was very significant. Last Sunday was the 72nd anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Um, that was a significant ruling that changed the trajectory of race in America. That decision was equally as imperative as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What made it imperative to me, what stood out to me, was not one major media news outlet focused on that decision. As important as that was, as the impact that that decision made, not one major media news outlet in today's time covered that. Now we know it's undoubtedly clear that we are experiencing a time of erasure or attempted erasure in America. We know that. We see it. We see where names of significant Black figures in American history have been taken off of significant warships or removed from significant websites. We see specific holidays that highlight the plight of Blacks in America. We see those holidays being removed. We see books that explain things that you won't see in American curriculum being taken off the shelves. But here recently, the 72nd anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education, and not one major media uh, made mention, or if they did, I didn't see it. I haven't seen any significant stories or reporting on that major event. That being said, I really want to make sure that you had 5 key takeaways from the video that I released last Sunday regarding Brown versus the Board of Education. So we're going to go ahead and dive in and we're going to talk about that. Takeaway number one is Brown versus the Board of Education was about more than just schools. The video points out that Brown versus the Board of Education was not just a debate about the classroom, it was challenging the entire system of a racial hierarchy in America. Key discussion points that we need to look at in that video is this: segregation was tied to political, economic, and social control. So the phrase separate but equal prior to Brown versus the Board of Education just legally justified inequality. Once again, segregation was tied to political, economic, and social control. So the phrase separate but equal just was a legal justification term to enforce inequality. The court's declaration that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, attacked the very foundation of Jim Crow itself. So that was a key takeaway that I needed you guys that watched the video to pull away from that. Thurgood Marshall, the lead prosecutor or the lead attorney and chief person on the staff, he understood that education represents power, opportunity, and citizenship. And the case forced America to confront whether equality in the Constitution applied to Black Americans in practice. That's what Thurgood Marshall did. It forced America to confront whether equality in the Constitution applied to Black Americans in practice. And on point number one, and each point going forward, I love to add these reflective questions. And the reflective question we have regarding point number one, when it comes to what happened in Brown versus the Board of Education and the decision that was made there, when we confront the Constitution and ask the question, does the equality that we refer to in the Constitution actually apply to Black people in practice? That's something that we still need to ponder today. But the reflective question is this: if education shapes opportunity, then what happens to a society when a group is intentionally denied educational opportunities for generations? Again, if education shapes opportunities, then what happens when a group is intentionally denied equal education for generations? That was point number one. Point number two, that the primary takeaway that I wanted you to take away from the video on Sunday about Brown versus the Board of Education is progress in America has historically been met with resistance. And we know that to be a fact. Progress in America has historically been met with resistance. One of the strongest themes in the video is that civil rights progress did not happen peacefully nor automatically. One, many states and communities openly resisted integration after the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education. Many states. And now what's interesting is a great deal of focus is often placed on the South, and rightfully so. But I want you to know that this is something that happened all across the country. As a matter of fact, a while back, I shared my own personal testimony with you guys about how my mom wanted my sister and I to get what she considered a good education. And so although we live in a predominantly Black community in the inner city, my mom's idea of a great education or a good education was at a Catholic school that was in the heart of the inner city. And one of the things that, as I recall, uh, when the buses were going to schools, the buses only ran during desegregation. I'm speaking on the buses only ran one way. Black children were bused to white schools, but what you did not see was white children being bused to Black schools. Why? Because the bus only ran one way. Some white schools shut down completely rather than integrate after the decision of Brown versus the Board of Education. They completely shut down. And I'm going to hit on this point before we move on to point number three a little bit later on too. A thing called massive resistance arose. And massive resistance shows just how deep segregation was and still is embedded in American institutions. Now, when we say institutions, we mean more than just academic systems. We mean more than just schools. Massive resistance was a coordinated effort by many white Southern politicians, school boards, and communities to resist and even block school integration even after the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education. One of the best examples that you'll get from this is the story of the Little Rock Nine. That you can go and look at. If you're not familiar with that, go and look at the story of the Little Rock Nine, where that integration crisis demonstrated how federal troops had to protect Black children who were just trying to go to school. A small piece of that I think needs to be highlighted, and that's prior to the enforcement of the federal government to use federal troops to make sure that Black children can get into schools. Prior to that, state governments use armed forces to block the Black students from entering into white schools. So they had to endure that, which they did, by the way. But if you want to get an idea of how deeply embedded segregation has and still is to some degree integrated into the American system, go and do your research on the Little Rock Nine. My video challenged popular ideas that once laws change, society immediately changes with it. That is a belief that I know to be true. This is a true story. Prior to my retirement, or my second retirement, of course, I did 20 years in the military and retired. And then I had a long career in corporate America after that. And that career I shared with you is where I traveled all across the country. And one of my coworkers were traveling with me. He was a white guy, and we were having a discussion. And in our discussion, I would share with him about some things that seemed awfully familiar pertaining to what we went through during Jim Crow and what we went through segregation, and today's climate. And his response often was, but things are not like that anymore. Things are not like that. And the laws have changed. And if you're not the one living and resisting those things, then you don't have an idea of how, just because the laws change on paper, how people in American society who share a certain mentality, they don't change with that. One of the things that we also need to keep in mind, we in America often hear phrases about God, Jesus, Christianity, and all of these things. But the white Christian church created their own schools after the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education for the sole purpose of keeping their white children from attending school with Black children. The church, the white Christian church. That is a part of history that we also need to understand. So when we hear these things about God, and we hear them talking about Jesus, and let me stop right here and make this disclaimer. This is not the mentality and the attitude of all white people in America. It is not. However, it is the ideology and the mentality of many white people in America. And they fell under this umbrella of those who talked about the Lord, who talked about Jesus Christ, but these were the very same people that, in order for them to not allow their children to go to school with Black children, their church built schools so that we could keep Black children and white children separate. So that's also a reality when it comes to the course of the plight of Blacks in America. The reflective question that I have for point number 2 is this. Why do we think people often celebrate civil rights victories today, but they oppose them so deeply then when they were happening in real time? Why do people celebrate civil rights victories today when they deeply oppose them when they were happening in real time? Just something to think about. The third takeaway that I wanted you to get from the video was education has always been connected to power and opportunity. And the video repeatedly emphasized that education is not just about academics. It affects nearly every aspect of life. And so that's why I'm going to put this up on the screen. And this is what Thurgood Marshall understood very well when arguing the case of Brown versus the Board of Education. Education influences income, employment, home ownership, political influence, and generational growth. And let us not forget that during chattel slavery, many states banned enslaved Africans from learning to read. Why? Because knowledge creates empowerment. Therefore, under Jim Crow laws, unequal schools help to maintain economic inequality. Unequal schools help to maintain economic inequality. The denial of equal education was not accidental, it was policy. And my video argues that controlling education can shape the future of entire communities. So, the reflective question that I have for point number 3 regarding to last week's video is this. Do you believe equal education is one of the most foundations of democracy? Why or why not? And as you ponder that question and you come up with your answer, please comment. We would like to read your comments and see what you have to say on the matter. So once again, the question is, do you believe that equal education is one of the most important foundations in American democracy? Why or why not? And please take the time to state your answer. Point number 4 that I wanted you to take away is this. Through all of my research, through all of my study, what I've come to learn is not rocket science. Segregation changed form, but inequality still exists. Point number 4, education changed form, but inequality still exists. A major modern takeaway is that segregation did not fully disappear in 1954. In many ways, it evolved. The video connects modern schools' inequalities to housing discrimination, redlining, zoning, and property tax-based funding. That one is very important because I don't know how many in today's society is aware of this very practice. Where what you see on the screen says, did you know Black people were taxed for schools their children weren't allowed to attend? During segregation, Black families paid the same taxes as everyone else, but their children were barred from white only schools, those taxes that they paid funded. So, although the white only signs in today's society may not remain, have you noticed that our school systems are still divided a great deal by race and income? Wealthier communities often have newer facilities, advanced programs, more educational opportunities. Why? While low income families, predominantly Black and brown, often face underfunded schools. My video that I aired on Sunday pushes you to ask whether legal equality automatically produces real equality. So the video pushes to ask the question, does legal equality automatically produce real equality? The reflective question from point number 4 that I wanted you to take away from the video is this. What does true equality, what does true equal opportunity in education actually look like in America today? So once again, the reflective question is, what does true equal opportunity in education actually look like in America today? Then my final point that I wanted you to take away from the video is this. History explains the present. The final major takeaway is that historical policies continue to shape America long after the laws have changed. Once again, point number 5, the fifth takeaway that I wanted you to get from the movie that was released on Sunday is that history explains the present and that historical policies continue shaping modern America long after laws have changed. My video released Sunday argues that history is not over simply because segregation became illegal. Policies affecting education, housing, voting rights, and wealth accumulation shape generations. Brown versus the Board of Education reminds us that we fought for those rights. Those rights were not freely given. And the video frames history as necessary for understanding current inequalities. The video challenged you to think honestly about America's past in order to address present issues that we're seeing. The reflective question for point number 5 is this. Why do discussions about race and history make people uncomfortable today? Why does discussions about race and history make people uncomfortable today? So those actually are the 5 key takeaways that I hope each of you have gotten from the video that was released on Sunday. If you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go back and watch it. One of the things that I take very seriously, and I'm coming to learn since we're now at well over 600,000 views, and I want to say thank you all for that, is that you can use this as a quick resource. We're talking about a Black history lesson that's not allowing erasure to take place in our time. And this can be done while you're on the move, of course. But I encourage you, I deeply encourage you to get your family together or get with someone else other than yourself. And I watched this thing on my cell phone. I watched these videos on my laptop. I've seen the videos on computers, desktop computers. These videos can be projected onto the TV. We've even projected the videos onto a movie screen. Why am I saying that? It doesn't take a lot of time. There's been 3 generations that's passed since the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education, and each generation gets further and further away from the fight that we've been having in the past. Now, I want to make myself clear that is not to say that the young children of today's generation are not mindful of what happened then, and they're not knowledgeable. But there is a pocket of Black society, and there's a pocket of American society as a whole, that the further we get away, the less relevant, vital times, situations, and circumstances are. Pull people together, watch the videos, discuss the videos, keep the information relevant. As long as we do that, no one, nowhere, at any time will ever allow Black history to be erased. And that's my goal and that's my objective. And with your support, we've had tremendous amount of success at doing this. And I am going to ensure that as long as there's breath in my body, I will continue to do this. The final takeaway that I want you to ponder about last week's video is this. Brown versus the Board of Education did not end inequality. It exposed it. The case forced America to admit that separate was never truly equal, while also revealing how difficult real change can be when our entire American system and its systems of inequality are deeply rooted in the very fabric of American society. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my time for now. I really enjoyed talking to you today. Once again, we just covered the 5 key points, and I've noted them, and you'll see them in the definition when it comes to looking at the video. The 5 key takeaways that I wanted you to take away from last Sunday's video regarding Brown versus the Board of Education last Sunday, and once again was the 72nd anniversary of that landmark decision, although no major media source or outlet covered the story. It's okay. We don't need you to do it. We'll do it ourselves. Also, to give you a heads up, this upcoming Sunday, we're releasing a video on the one drop rule. That's also very important because it also shaped and formed a lot of things in not only America's past, but that we see in America's presence even today. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video. Make sure you get the 5 key takeaways. Discuss the video with your family and your friends to keep our Black history relevant. So, and let's not just take for granted that just because someone is Black they're mindful of the challenges that we continuously overcome to ensure that we demand our rightful place in this society. Thank you so much. I'll see you at the next video. Take care.